All right, so section 3 gets us into talking about square roots, which again, it's just something that gets used all throughout the year, both for the square root piece of it and also for the factoring piece that we get to practice once we get into skill 2. So square roots, huge, and we keep coming back to them, so the stronger you can get with them early on, the better off you are. And again, there's some really good just basic number sense stuff that we're going to do in this first skill. So what is the square root? It's a weird thing to try to define. It's more like an easy thing, like you know what it is, like when you see one. But my definition, the square root of x is the number that gives you x when multiplied by itself. Which again, kind of clunky to say, but like the square root of 36 is 6. Okay, because the square root of 36 is the number that gives you 36 when you multiply it by itself. So 6 multiplied by itself gives me 36. That's the square root. The symbol we use for square roots is called a radical. So that symbol above it, called the radical symbol, that'll come up a little more later on in the year. The very first thing we want to do is just get comfortable with square roots and decimals. Even though we don't use the decimal versions a lot, this again is a really good number sense thing, and just letting me know and letting yourself know that you understand how decimals work. Okay, so to do this, I built a perfect squares number line on the top of the board that should be up there for all of the different skills in this section. I went from 0 to 15 because that's about as big of a number that we'll have as kind of our base after square rooting. So I did a regular number line up in the top, and technically the bottom is a regular number line as well. It just starts going a little bit faster because these are all of those perfect squares. Okay, so like 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and so on up to 15 squared. Okay, and I say it's just like any other normal number line because like up here, you've got like 0.3 and 2.7 and all the decimals in between. But you also have those down here, okay, along with all the numbers in between. Like you might not see the number 11, but 11 is here between 9 and 16. And so this number line is really nice because it helps you convert stuff and like visualize the conversions between a whole number and its square root. So like the square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 81 is 9. Or the square of 11 is 121. So you can go backwards and forwards with it. Okay. So to do the estimating piece, all we're going to do is we're going to take the square root we're trying to find. We're going to pinch it between two perfect squares. So between the two squares, it's in between itself. Then we're just going to guess to the nearest tenth. So one decimal place. Okay. Do not overstress on doing these. You can check them with a calculator when you're done, but it doesn't have to be perfect. You just got to kind of be in the ballpark. If you're within a tenth or two, you're fine. It's an estimate. Okay, so like when I look at the square root of 34, I want to pinch it between the two closest numbers. So I go up here, and I figure that 34 is between 25 and 36. Okay, what does that tell me about the square root of 34? Well, then the square root of 34 is somewhere between 5 and 6. So I'm going to write this part out. You don't need to, but square root of 34 is pinched between 5 and 6. We see that on this number line. If I have a number that's pinched between 5 and 6, I already know then that it has to be 5 point something. Because all the numbers that are bigger than 5 but smaller than 6 are 5 point somethings. Okay. And this is where the estimate comes in. Okay, and the way I do it is I kind of take a look at the two closest squares and I say, okay, which one is it closer to? So 34, is it closer to 25 or is it closer to 36? Okay, and it's closer to 36, which means my answer is going to be closer to 6 than it is to 5. Okay, how do I figure out what decimal I want to use? Okay, am I a lot closer to 36 or am I kind of more in the middle? So is 34 really close to 36 or is it more like halfway between these two? Okay, and I would say that it's really close to the 36, okay, which means my estimate's going to be something high in the 5s, like 5.8 or 5.9. Okay, and either one of them is fine. So my estimate, 5.8, perfect. Okay, and again, you could punch the square root of 34 into a calculator. You will probably get 5.8 something. Okay, so your estimate will actually be pretty accurate for just being a guess with a little bit of practice. Example 2, it's negative, who cares? That doesn't change anything. Just ignore the negative until the end. Find the 55. So 55 is between 49 and 64. Which means the square root of 55 is somewhere between 7 and 8. So the square root of 55 is somewhere between 7 and 8. If I have a number that's somewhere between 7 and 8, that has to be 7 point something. Okay. And so I take a look and I say, all right, is 55 closer to 49 or is it closer to 64? Okay, so to get from 49 to 55, we're 6 away. To get from 64 to 55, we're 9 away. Okay, so we are definitely closer to 7, but we're not like way closer to 7. Now, this is somewhat close to being in the middle. Okay, so when you pick your answer, go closer to 7 than to 8, so below 7.5. Okay? But it only leans towards the 7. It's not like way over, it's not like the square root of 50 or 51. Okay, so when you make your estimate, it's going to be less than 0.5, but it's not going to be right next to the 7. Okay, so something like 7.3 or 7.4. And if you punch it in a calculator, it's probably 7.3 something. Okay. So again, you look at it, you find which two it's between, and then just sort of see which way it's leaning. Okay. And then the last example, again, if you want to pause the video and try it on your own quick and see what you get. Otherwise, we'll just keep going. The square root of 105 is up here between 10 and 11. So the square root of 105 is somewhere between 10 and 11, which means it's 10 point something. And then just take a look at how far you are in each side. It's definitely closer to the 10. So we're going to do something small, a 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. Okay. Is it a lot closer to the 10 or just a little bit closer? Well, it's only 5 away from the 10, and it's 16 away from the 11, so it's quite a bit closer. Okay. So maybe something like 10.2. It's quite a bit closer to the 10 than it is to the 11. That's a pretty good estimate. And again, you can always use a calculator and the check at the end. Okay. So that's estimating a square root.